What's up everyone, this is the second video I'm doing on changes or modifications to my Ti-30 scooter. In the first one I changed my grip tape, of course, from the Laotie name to this Pal Peralta throwback skateboard grip tape. I also changed my hand grips from the stock rubber ones to these nicer locking hand grips. And then lastly I removed the Laotie lettering from the side of the stem there on both sides, so it's just all black now. And also I removed that warning label or whatever it was that was on this side. The next thing I'm going to do is get rid of these headlights, replacing them with the same kind I'm using on my Q-Power scooter, which are these here. I ordered these off Amazon, I think 26 bucks for the set of them. Before removing these, I want to show you a comparison between these and the ones I'm going to be switching to. Here's the lights on the Ti-30, but you can see it's just like a straight line of light. It doesn't spread out very far. Turn those off. Other ones I have in my Q-Power. Very bright, nice wide beam. Again, here's the Laotie, and then now I'm going to turn on the other ones I have in my Q-Power. And you can see the vast difference in the two. To start with, I'm just going to take these two screws out here and take the whole headlight off with that bracket. So I took those two screws out of the bracket there, and now the headlight comes off loosely. Okay, go take the other side out. Again, remove the two screws holding that bracket on. I got both of them off now. I'm going to remove the headlight now, just cut the wires. There's a red one and a black one. I'm still going to use this bracket here that's on the front of the scooter. So after cutting off the headlights, I stripped some of the wire back, and of course there's just our red and our black wire coming up from that cable that was going to the headlight. While I'm working on the front end here, I'm going to pull this horn off. I don't like the horn. I never use the horn. I have no need for it. I don't like the way it looks. So I'm just going to get rid of it altogether. Of course, you can just unplug these two wires here, which is again the negative voltage going to the horn, and the positive switch voltage, which is now coming from the horn button. Okay, so I've got the wires disconnected, and then there's just the one screw holding it to the chassis here. Remove the horn. I think that looks a lot better. Like I said, I never like the look of the horn on there. This wire that was going to the horn, these set of wires, for now I'm just going to push them back here. Okay, so since I'm going to be trying to use this bracket here still, I want to make sure it's level, because I can already tell this one's down further, this one's up higher. I want to try to level these out as best as possible. I got that level out pretty good. I ended up using just a regular needle nose pliers, decent sized ones, and a rubber mallet just to like pound on these bars to straighten them out a little bit and try and level them off. You get two lights and a packet of hardware for each. So you end up with two of these pieces, the bracket together with the light. You end up with two of those, and then the additional bolt, split washer, and nut that goes through the bottom of the bracket to mount it to something else. I decided to just take this bracket here with the bolt and mount it directly to here through the first holes. There's enough room to have them side by side. The lights are real close together then, but I'm going to try it just these lights spread out anyway, so I think it'll still be pretty good. One thing I got to do first though is the screw that goes down through that bracket is a little bit bigger than the holes here, so I'm going to have to get a drill bit and widen out these holes a little bit. I decided to use these further out holes to mount the lights on, so they're sticking a little bit further out. Pretty level at the ends there, so I'm going to go ahead and drill my holes out and then mount the lights. I'm going to use a 5/16 drill bit to widen out this hole a little bit here. It doesn't have to be precise or anything, just has to be the hole has to be bigger than this bolt, so the bolt will fit through the hole. So because there's an existing hole there already, it's pretty easy, but just use high speed and low pressure on it. Don't push hard on it. Let the drill bit cut through it. Okay, we're going to check now, and yes, the bolt does now fit. I want to just check and make sure there's no real sharp edges or anything. There's a little bit of an edge down there on the bottom. Top's pretty good. So I'm going to take a metal file and just file along the bottom of these holes. Our bolts fit through there nicely, so now I'm going to mount the brackets onto this brace here. So the bolt going through the bracket, then going through the scooter bracket, and then the split washer and the nut. Alright, got those snugged up. Now I'm just going to mount my lights back onto these brackets. Got those both mounted down now. Just snugged up really good because I still want to be able to move them. I'm going to have to adjust them later when it gets dark. But that came out rather good. Didn't have to like redo anything, just use the existing bracket that was there with the parts that they give you with the lights, and was able to just mount them on there like that. So looking at our lines now, we know we have our cable coming from the scooter that has the black, which is the negative voltage, and the red, which is the switch positive from the headlight switch. If we look at the side coming out of the light, there's three wires, a black, red, and a yellow. The red is the power for the headlight. The yellow is the power for the ring, the blue ring. And the black is the negative voltage for both the ring and the headlight. So the black wire from the light is going to go to the black wire from the scooter cable, where the old headlight used to be. So black wire to black wire. At this point, I have to make a decision. Do I want the headlight and the blue ring to come on at the same time, or do I want to be able to turn on the ring by itself without having the headlight on? I want to be able to turn the ring on separately from the headlight. But if you didn't care about that, if you want the ring to come on with the headlight, it's a little bit easier. You can just then tie the positive red to the positive yellow, so that's the positive for both the headlight and the ring tied together, and then you'd put them to the red, which is the switch power. That way, when you turn on the switch, both the yellow wire and the red wire, in other words, both the headlight and the ring, will get power and turn on together. The way I want to do it is like I did on my Q Power. I want the headlight to be one switch, I want the ring to be a different switch, and also on that switch with the ring will be all my accessory lights, my RGB lighting that I'm going to do in a little bit here, and any other accessory lighting will be all on the same switch with the rings. So to do what I want to do, I can't tie the red and yellow together. The black will still go to the black. That will give both the ring and the headlight the negative voltage. I'm going to tie the red one to that. So at that point, I'll have the black wire to the black wire, the red wire to the red wire, and at that point, when I turn on the headlight switch, the new headlight will turn on just like the Ti-30 did. The ring won't, because this will be the control, the voltage, the switch voltage for the ring. Okay, so actually there was a separate light, a headlight wire for each headlight originally. There's this one that went to the one headlight, and then there's this one that went to the other headlight. So two separate wires running up for each one. They're exactly the same. Therefore, I'm going to wire it up like I did on my Q Power, where I just tie both of the headlights together and then tie them to one of the wires. So what I'm doing here is I'm starting with the wires from both the headlights. So I got both the headlight cables there. I took the two black wires and twisted them together at the end. I'm going to put a little bit of solder. I have my soldering iron set to about 300. That should be fine. So now I'm just going to put a little bit of solder on this wire. Okay, so I've done that with all three sets of wires coming from the two new lights. I also did the same thing with one of the existing headlight cables that came from the old headlight. I stripped a wire and put a little bit of solder on the ends of each wire. So now I'm simply going to take my existing headlight cable, the red and the black wire. I'm going to solder the red wire to my two red wires going to the headlights, and the black wire going to the two black wires going to the headlights. Before I actually solder the wires together, I want to think about how I'm going to protect them from shorting out. I always choose to use heat shrink tubing, such as this. You can pick this stuff up at any hardware store. You could just use electrical tape or something like that, but this leaves a much neater, cleaner look. I use a bigger piece that will slide over all three of these wires and slide it back up here as far as I can. And I'm going to also use a smaller piece that's going to go on each individual connection, so these connections will be isolated from each other. And then I'm going to take the bigger piece, when all is said and done, slide it back down over all the wires and everything, so it just looks like one black cable at that point. The biggest size I have right now is 1/4 inch, so I'm going to try to slide that over these wires and then up onto this cable. You can see there's the heat shrink tubing I've got going up those cables there. So I used, I believe it was 3/32 inch heat shrink on the individual wire combinations here, where I have the two of them twisted together. So now I'm simply going to take one of my existing headlight wires from the original headlights, solder the black to the black and the red to the red. So I got the red and the black wires connected now. So at this point I should be able to turn on my headlight switch and the headlight should come on. And they do, so that's good, everything's good. Headlights are working halfway there. I just now need to hook up my outer rings, and I'm going to do that on a different switch. But before I move on to that, I'm going to just slide my heat shrink down over this red and this black wire. Pull the heat shrink down over those two connections, the red and the black. I'm not going to shrink it yet. I'm not going to put any heat on it because I don't want to also shrink this yellow one since I haven't connected it yet. Alright, so I have to make a decision now. I've got my headlights hooked up, that's good. I want to hook up my the two rings now, which I got tied together with this yellow wire. I need to have a way to switch that on and off separate from the headlights. I'm going to use my Eco turbo switch. I'm going to disconnect that so it will no longer be an Eco turbo switch. I'm going to be using that to turn on my accessory lights and the rings in the headlights. But to do that, I'm going to have to go through the wiring down here. I'm very familiar with this. It's a dual motor scoot. They're all pretty much the same as far as wiring goes, so I know it's pretty good. I imagine it'll be very familiar to me. Anyway, so first of all, I'm going to have to locate where the Eco mode switch plugs on down here. So this looks like just a big tangle of wires. At a later date, I'm going to go through this and clean it up a lot and get rid of these big blocks and make more room in there and clean up the wiring in general. But for now, I'm not concerned about that. I just want to get these lights hooked up. So right now, I'm looking for the connection. That's the switch, the Eco turbo switch that comes down and connects into the controller or into the cabling down here. Now I know from previous experience, it's the red and yellow wire. And it's this one right here. It's a 2-pin male red yellow wire, and it's plugged onto a 2-pin female gray and black wire, and that wire just ends up going back into the controller. So I'm going to disconnect this, and again you can see it's the red and yellow wire, 2-pin male. I'm going to use this side because this is what goes up to the switch, the Eco turbo switch, this connection right here, the red and yellow wire. Where it was plugged onto, this gray and black, that was the indicator to the controller that you were enabling Eco mode. I'm not going to use that anymore, so that cable I'm just going to tuck away. Again, the black and the gray, 2-pin female, it was plugged onto the red yellow. We're not going to use that anymore. We won't have Eco mode anymore, so we're not going to use that one. I need to have a way to get switched power back here to my two yellow wires. We used one of the headlight cables, original headlight cables, for the red and black wires that go to the headlights of the new lights, and we're going to use the second headlight cable that went to the second headlight, and we're going to use that to bring our power back up to the yellow here. First thing I'm going to do is I need to locate the opposite end of this cable. The easiest way to do that is to see the cable goes back into this cable sheathing, where it then goes down inside the chassis to one of these cables. Since it's not that tight, I can just take the cable I'm looking for and pull on it and see if I see any movement down here. And you can see that one moving. So now that I found it, I'm going to disconnect the plug. There's the two sides. The 2-pin male side goes back up to that other end over there, which used to go to the headlight. So we're going to use that side. The 2-pin female side goes back into this joining of wires here. We're not going to be using the 2-pin female side anymore, so we're just going to put that one away. There is another connector coming out of the controller here. I found a single red and black wire coming directly out of the controller with a 2-pin female on it. Again, red and black wires. And this has the positive battery voltage on the red wire, negative on the black wire, and it's always there as long as the controllers are plugged onto the battery. I don't need the negative power, so the black wire I don't need. The red wire has the positive battery power, so I need to use that one. The black wire has the negative battery power. I don't need that, so I'm going to cut this black wire off, leave a little length because I'm going to use that in a minute. Okay, so I have the red wire coming directly from the controller to this 2-pin female connector. The black wire I have cut open, so I just have a loose piece of black wire on this side, not connected to anything. So at this point I can plug this 2-pin female that has the positive power on it onto my yellow and red plug, which I know goes up to my yellow push button up there. Okay, so have that plugged on now. So in effect what I'm doing, I have again the positive battery power on this red wire crossing through the connector to the yellow wire. The yellow wire goes up the cable to the yellow push button, where it sits and waits until you push the push button in. Then the power comes back down the other wire on the red wire, back out, and then will be on the black wire. So this black wire will be the switched power from that yellow push button. Now to get that switched battery power from this black wire up to the 2 yellow wires, I'm going to use the cable that we identified, the second headlight cable. In this case, I'm just going to hardwire it. So I'm going to cut this connector off the 2-pin male, and I'm going to just hardwire. It doesn't matter which wire you use. I think I'm just going to use the red wire. I've cut the connector off, and now I'm really only going to be using one wire. I'm using the red one, so I'm just going to cut the black one off short along the end here. I'm going to strip back the red one a little bit. So I stripped that red wire back a little bit and tinned it with some solder. Also did the same thing with this loose black wire that we previously cut. Now I just need to connect those 2 wires. Normally I would use a heat shrink tubing here, but in this case I'm going to be opening this connection again very soon to tap into the power for my accessory lights. So for now I'm just going to solder these together and then put a piece of tape around it. Taped it off so it won't short out against anything, and then on the piece of tape I wrote ACC for accessory, so I know that this is my switched power that I'm using with that yellow push button. Next thing we have finished up here is getting the other end of that wire, the red wire on this end. Again, we're not using the black, so I'm going to cut the black off, so we just have the red wire, and I'm going to run that to our 2 yellow wires that are tied together going to the rings. So got the red wire connected up to those 2 yellow wires, and that should be everything. I pulled the heat shrink back down over those connections. Before I tighten that up with the heat gun, I want to make sure that the lights are all working. So go on, quick check on the headlights. They're good. And now I'm going to use my Eco button here to turn on the rings, hopefully. Yeah, it's kind of hard to see in the daytime, but they did indeed come on. There's on, off, on. Next I'm going to use my heat gun to heat up this heat shrink here and get to shrink onto the connections. I need to keep the heat away from this bigger piece as much as possible though. Alright, so those are sealed good. Next I'm going to take the bigger piece of heat shrink tubing and slide it down over all the wires in these connections. Looks good, nice and clean. Another thing, before you connect up your wires here, run them through this hole in the bracket. It holds the wires good that way. I think I'll just probably put these back through here and maybe use a tie wrap on it right there. That looks better than like having them come up the side or even just hanging through the middle. So make use of that hole there in that bracket. Also, I used a heat gun to heat up the heat shrink, to shrink it like that. You don't have to have a heat gun. You could use a hair dryer, a blow dryer, or if you even don't have one of those, you could just use like a lighter or a candle or something. Don't hold it too close, you don't want to burn it, but just the heat, let the heat rise up, and you can actually shrink it that way as well. So that's it. Got both the headlights hooked up and the rings on a separate switch. Using the Eco switch, came out pretty good. Just gotta wait for it to get a little darker out so I can adjust the lights and see how they look. A little darker out now. I'm now going to push my Eco Turbo mode switch, which is now my accessory light switch. So right now it's out. I'm going to push it in, and you can see now my 2 blue rings light up, and eventually that will also be my RGB lighting that I'm going to have on the side. Okay, so let's take a look at the new headlights. Now it's a little darker. Nice wide beam, nice and bright. I love these lights. pretty much a must-have if you're going to be riding fast at night. You need to see not just what's immediately in front of you, but off to the sides as well. And these don't blind oncoming drivers. They direct light downwards and spread it out. If any of you guys go try this and you need some help, drop me an email. Leave my email down in the comments there. It's really not that hard. These lights are incredibly much better than what's originally on there, as you can see. And it's really not that hard to do, especially if you're just going to wire up the rings along with the headlights so they all come on at the same time. Then it's just literally just clipping the old ones off and wiring the new ones on. Okay, next thing after this, I'm going to be getting rid of those side lights pretty soon here and upgrading with some RGB lights up underneath the deck. Till then, guys, take care, peace, ride safe.